We are now at war in Europe. We need to move to a war footing. We are involved in that. We've mobilized our procurement processes. We're gifting equipment. We need to face Russia directly and rather than leaving Ukraine.
This is my video update from Nicosia, Cyprus on this Wednesday afternoon, July the 5th. Let's talk about some news. And let's do a quick update on NATO and the search for a NATO leader. It's not going to happen this year, but next year, the search for a new NATO Security Secretary General has begun, and the Telegraph is reporting that Joe Bidenopoulos, Greece's favorite son, he is in favor of Ursula von der Crazy taking over for Jens Stoltenberg next year as NATO's new Secretary General. The Telegraph has an article with the title, Biden pushes for von der Leyen to be NATO chief. Brussels chief has emerged as the frontrunner amid difficulties finding a successor to Jens Stoltenberg, who has had his term extended. So it looks like the preparations for an Ursula von der Leyen tenure as the NATO security, I keep on saying security, as the NATO Secretary General has begun, which essentially means that von der Leyen has to pick up her stuff at her office at the EU headquarters in Brussels and walk across the streets to her new office at the NATO headquarters in Brussels. So I thought that was a bit of interesting news from the Biden White House and from the Telegraph. Let's now talk a bit about the ZNPP, the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. And we had this statement yesterday evening from Elensky. This is his video, Instagram, TikTok statement that he makes pretty much every evening or every other evening. And he also posted this on Twitter as well. At least the part about the ZNPP was put on Twitter as a post. And this is what Elensky said. Now we have information from our intelligence that the Russian military has placed objects resembling explosives on the roof of several power units of the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, perhaps to simulate an attack on the plant. Perhaps they have some other scenario. But in any case, the world can't but see that the only source of danger to the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant is Russia and no one else. Unfortunately, there was no timely and large-scale response to the terrorist attack on the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant, and this may incite the Kremlin to commit new evil. It is the responsibility of everyone in the world to stop it. No one can stand aside as radiation affects everyone. So this is a very carefully constructed statement, a carefully crafted script that was prepared for Elensky to read out to the world. And let's break this down a bit, because Elensky says some very interesting things, or this script that was prepared for Elensky says some very interesting things. First, it says that Ukraine intel has seen objects resembling explosives on the roof of several power units of the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. Ukraine intel is saying that Russian military is placing objects that resemble explosives on the roof of the ZNPP. That's how they're going to do this thing. They're going to blow up, according to Elensky, according to the statement prepared for Elensky, they're going to blow up the ZNPP by placing explosives on the roof. Interesting. But they always leave a bit of a way out, don't they? Because in the statement they say objects resembling explosives. Could be explosives. They look like explosives, but maybe not. They resemble explosives. That's what we see the Russian military placing on the roof of the ZNPP. Then the statement says that perhaps this is to simulate an attack on the plant. Perhaps they have some other scenario. Perhaps. But in any case, the world can't but see that the only source of danger to the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant is Russia and no one else. No one else. Don't you dare attribute what's about to happen to the ZNPP to anyone else. It is obviously Russia that is doing this. No one else. Some Jedi mind tricks there. No one else. No one else. Russia blew up the ZNPP. Russia blew it up. No one else. Some Elensky Jedi mind trick. Maybe he's being helped out by Mark Hamill. He is, after all, the Ukraine drone ambassador. Let's see. The statement then says that this is an interesting part. The statement tries to attribute a motive to what is about to happen to the ZNPP for Russia blowing up the ZNPP. This is a really interesting. This is the interesting part of the statement. Unfortunately, there was no timely and large-scale response to the terrorist attack on the Kakhovka hydroelectric plant. And this may incite the Kremlin to commit new evil. A very interesting sentence right there. An interesting couple of sentences right there. So the motive, if we're to understand this correctly, this is the motive that they're trying to give all of this. Russia is going to blow up the ZNPP because there was no action taken when a terrorist attack blew up the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant. Notice that in this sentence, Elensky doesn't attribute the destruction of the power plant to Russia. He doesn't say that. He says there was no timely and large-scale response to the terrorist attack on the Kakhovka hydroelectric plant. He doesn't say there was no timely response to Russia's attack on the Kakhovka hydroelectric plant. Don't you think that if the collective West was 100% sure, if the scriptwriters were 100% certain that Russia blew up the Kakhovka Dam, that they would say a Russian terrorist attack on the Kakhovka Dam instead of just leaving it kind of open-ended and saying the terrorist attack on the Kakhovka hydroelectric plant? And then the statement says, this may incite the Kremlin to commit new evil. It's the fact that no action was taken on the Kakhovka Dam explosion, of which Elensky isn't attributing to Russia. He's not attributing it to Russia, but because no action is taken, this is going to incite the Kremlin to blow up the ZNPP. That's the motive. That's the motive that they're going with. Boy, that is as flimsy as a motive as you could possibly get for a possible attack on the ZNPP. Because the big problem that the collective West has, that the scriptwriters have, is that with this whole ZNPP narrative is motive. Why? Why in God's name would Russia blow up the ZNPP? Why would they blow up Nord Stream? Why would they blow up the Kakhovka Dam? Why would they blow up a nuclear power plant that they've controlled pretty much from day one of the special military operation, a power plant that, according to the Russian Constitution, is now part of the Russian Federation, a power plant that provides and is going to provide power to Russian citizens of the Zaporozhye Federation, which is part of the Russian Federation. Why in God's name would Russia blow up their own power plant on their own territory that services their own people at a time when they're winning the conflict in Ukraine, not by a little, but by a lot. We are a month plus into the big counteroffensive, and to this day, Ukraine has still not managed to get to the first line of defense. Not the second line of defense, not the third line of defense, the first line of defense. And the latest reports are, conservative reports, are that Ukraine has lost 20,000 soldiers trying to make their way out of the gray zone, trying to make their way past the gray zone, this gray area, and trying to establish some sort of foothold to begin the process to get to the first line of Russian fortifications. Why would Russia blow up the ZNPP when they're winning across the board, militarily, economically, in public opinion, diplomatically, across the world, outside the collective West? Russia is winning across the entire spectrum of the conflict, and they're going to wake up one morning and blow up their own power plant that services their own people on their own territory, according to the Russian Constitution. Why would they do this? Well, according to this statement from Elensky, according to the scriptwriters in LA or DC or London or New York, Russia's going to do this because no one punished the terrorists. We don't know who it is yet because they don't want to say who it is. No one has punished the terrorist attack on the Kakhovka Dam because there's been no punishment for the Kakhovka Dam. This is going to incite Russia to blow up the ZNPP. What a bunch of bullocks. They are really, really reaching here. Boy, are they reaching. And then you have the closing argument from Elensky where he says, it is the responsibility of everyone in the world to stop it. No one can stand aside as radiation affects everyone. And it's that radiation affects everyone line, which I think is the key to this statement from Elensky. The thinking with the sabotage of the ZNPP goes like this, and I'm going to read you a statement from a nuclear power plant expert in an interview conducted on Russia's Rossiya 24 TV channel. And I think this nuclear power plant expert sums up things perfectly. And let me just give you a quick summary before I read you his quotes. Basically, what this expert, Renat Karcha, who is a senior Russian atomic energy industry official, this is what he told Rossiya 24 yesterday. Ukraine is going to try to destroy the ZNPP with a big missile strike. That's going to be attempt number one. They're going to try to knock out the ZNPP. But it's going to be very difficult for them to do this because knocking out the ZNPP is going to be very, very hard. It's going to need some serious missiles to do the job. And I've read analysis from a lot of experts who say that knocking out the ZNPP, the reactor, and blowing up the power plant is going to be a huge undertaking if you're going to be using missiles, cruise missiles and stuff like that. So that's going to be the first attempt. Most likely they won't succeed in this first attempt. And that's when they're going to go to the second option, which is going to be loading up a missile with radiation waste, radioactive waste, and sending it into the ZNPP. And when that missile hits in the area of the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, you're going to get increased radiation levels, and the United States is going to measure those radiation levels, and voila, you have a false flag. So let me read you what this expert said. On July 5th, literally overnight, while it's still dark, Ukrainian forces will attempt an attack on the Zaporozhye plant with long-range, high-precision munitions as well as suicide drones. Kiev is also expected to attempt a strike on the plant with a heavy Soviet-made Tochka-U tactical ballistic missile. The munition has been filled with radioactive waste collected from the South Ukrainian nuclear power plant. The apparent goal of the secondary attack is to cause an uptick in the radioactivity readings in the region should the main launch fail to damage the facility enough to cause the release of hazardous materials into the air. So Simplicius the Thinker, on his latest Substack post, he had a very similar analysis to what this atomic energy official told Russia 24, which is that the initial strike to damage the ZNPP will most likely fail. It will be a difficult task to damage the ZNPP enough so that you release radioactive material into the air, and that's when you get this missile with radioactive waste hitting the ZNPP, and that's when the US comes in and measures the radioactive material in the air, and that's when you get the false flag. You take that then to the NATO meeting in Vilnius on the 11th of July, and that's when you get NATO's involvement into the conflict, because the argument is going to be made that this radioactive material that is now in the air has made its way to Poland and the Baltics and Romania, and this is enough to trigger Article 5 of NATO so that they can get involved in this conflict in Ukraine. Now, the interesting part to this scenario is that the United States, they actually sent an airplane from the US to Europe that specializes in measuring the radioactive emissions in the air. And this plane was in the United States. They sent it to Europe, and its purpose is to measure radioactive levels in the atmosphere. And so why would the United States send this plane, which is called a WC-135R Constant Phoenix, with a special nuclear monitoring board? Why would they send this to Europe if there wasn't some sort of false flag being prepared? And you know, given the history of Chernobyl, and you even had an HBO special on Chernobyl, given all of this history about nuclear accidents, nuclear catastrophes in Ukraine, the collective West media is going to have a pretty easy sell on this false flag of the ZNPP with the collective West audience. The collective West audience, through Chernobyl, through the HBO special, they're going to be primed and ready to believe that there was some sort of radioactive event triggered by the Russians at the ZNPP, and that will trigger some sort of NATO involvement in the conflict in Ukraine. So that is one of the possible scenarios that could go down in the next couple of days. Of course, all of this could be BS. This could be a bluff that the script writers in DC are putting together. This could be some good acting from Elensky and just a whole lot of BS, and nothing's going to happen at the ZNPP. And all of this is just being used to keep up the tension, to keep up the panic across the collective West before the NATO meeting in Vilnius, to just keep Russia on everybody's mind, to keep up the fear levels cranked up to 11, so that when they do have their meeting in Vilnius, Elensky can go there and he can ask for more money and more weapons, because there's just a general panic and fear in the collective West and amongst NATO members. So all of this could just be complete nonsense and complete BS, and the Elensky regime is not planning to do anything. There is no false flag being prepared at the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. And of course, you have another option, which is that they're going to try all of this, but Russia's going to be ready, and they're going to thwart and repel any type of false flag that is being targeted at the ZNPP. Peskov actually told the media today that Russia is aware of all of the talk about sabotage at the ZNPP, and Russia is taking all of the necessary precautions to prevent any type of an attack on the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. So they may try something, but Russia will be ready for it, and that will be that. So that is what is going on with the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant and a possible false flag. So let's now discuss a real attack that took place yesterday in the town of Makiivka, which is in Donetsk, and the Ukraine military, they shelled this town in Donetsk, and they hit a hospital, and there were a lot of casualties, a lot of people hurt in this strike at Clinical Hospital number 2. So that took place yesterday, and usually when Ukraine prepares some sort of provocation, I've seen in the past that when Ukraine does prepare some sort of false flag or provocation, it's usually preceded by some sort of shelling or bombing activity, an increased shelling or bombing activity of civilian infrastructure in the Donbass. So this could be seen as a sign, as a signal that Ukraine is indeed planning to do something to the ZNPP. Anyway, a horrific attack from the Ukraine military towards a clinical hospital where a lot of civilians were injured. I believe children as well were hurt in this attack on the hospital. So let's I think we should shift gears a bit before we wrap up this video and talk briefly about another type of conflict that is taking place. And this is a trade war between China and the collective West. And the other day, you had the collective West, the US, and I believe the Netherlands actually triggered this response from China, but the collective West, as a collective, they are preventing equipment, chip making equipment and material from being exported, from being sent to China, in order to prevent China from making chips, semiconductor chips and semiconductor chip technology. And so the other day, the Netherlands, they prevented equipment that is used to create chips from going to China. And so China, they retaliated to this export block from the collective West. And this is the title from Bloomberg: China restricts export of chip-making metals in clash with US. Beijing will limit gallium and germanium exports from August 1st. Both metals are indispensable for producing some chips. So this is a very clever move on behalf of China, because what has happened here is that as the US is preventing equipment in the chip making process from going to China in order to prevent China from producing chips, what China is doing is that they are restricting the actual rare earth metals from going to the collective West. And this is going to have huge implications on collective West supply chains, including supply chains that need these metals to make, from what I understand, to make a lot of military equipment, radar displays, to produce fighter jets, and all kinds of other technologies the banning of these rare earth metals is going to really hurt the collective West military industrial complex and really damage collective West supply chains, including the collective West's own production of semiconductors and microchips. So this is a huge escalation in the trade war between China and the collective West. But this is a trade war that is moving very quickly towards becoming a hot war. So in Germany, actually, let me read you something that Bloomberg says about restricting gallium and germanium. This will increase costs for manufacturers and exacerbate geopolitical tensions in the context of the race to develop advanced computing technologies. So the West is preventing equipment in the chip-making process from reaching China, and China is now preventing the actual metals that are needed for producing chips and other technologies from going to the collective West. A huge escalation. Anyway, in Germany, we have some polling data which is coming out, which is pretty shocking. The polling data is showing that the AfD is actually the number one party in Germany. Now, there's a caveat to this polling data. The AfD is the number one party in Germany if you split apart the coalition of the CDU and the CSU. Right now, they're one block, the CDU and the CSU. But if you treat this block as two separate parties, the CDU as one party and the CSU as one party, then the AfD comes out ahead in the latest polls in Germany. And I actually believe that the AfD, for the first time in their history, they actually got a mayor elected in Germany as well. So the AfD continues to rise. The CDU, CSU, SPD, and the Green Party, the establishment parties, the warmongering establishment parties in Germany continue to slide. And China, in some more bad news for the European Union, China actually canceled the planned trip of Jungle Joseph Borrell to visit Beijing, and they didn't even give a reason as to why they canceled this trip of Jungle Joseph to Beijing. Unfortunately, and this is according to a spokesperson for the EU, this is what they told Reuters, unfortunately, we were informed by the Chinese counterparts that the envisioned dates next week are no longer possible, and we must now look for alternatives, in reference to China canceling a planned visit by the EU's foreign policy chief, Joseph Borrell. So remember what China did to Ursula von der Crazy when she visited Beijing? Remember how China sent Ursula packing from her visit to China? Well, in this instance, the Chinese officials, they don't even want to see Borrell enter the country, let alone embarrassing him on his exit from the country. They're just like, you know, Borrell, don't even bother coming. What an embarrassment for Jungle Joseph and for the European Union. All right, let's do a clown world and wrap this video up. Let's make this video a short one for the day. And in this clown world, we are going to talk about two stories that came up on my clown world radar. The first story has to do with an interview, a walk and talk interview of who was once Elensky's BFF. This guy used to be Elensky's best buddy, and that is Arestovich. And he was giving a walk and talk interview. I think these are, he's walking through the streets of, I believe, in Kiev. In Kiev, he is walking through the streets of Kiev. And as he's walking through the streets of Kiev and this journalist is interviewing Arestovich, they pass by a whole bunch of graffiti. Now, I do the walk and talks, And as I do my walk and talks, I also pass by a whole bunch of graffiti. And there have been many comments in my videos on the amount of graffiti that they see in Cyprus and in Greece. I'm not a fan of graffiti either. I'm a fan of street art. I'm not a fan of graffiti. And as Adestovich is being interviewed, they walk by some graffiti, and the graffiti says, Elensky is a D head. Elensky is a D head. That is what this graffiti said during this walk and talk interview in Kiev. During this interview, by the way, Arestovich told the journalist that Ukraine will need 2 or 3 more counteroffensives to reach the 1991 borders. Just another 3 more counteroffensives and success. Another 3 more counteroffensives and we will have success, according to Arestovich. All right, let's do another quick clown world, and this is coming from The Star. They've actually run 2 articles on this story. The first one has the title, Putin set to invade the moon with a 20 million pound rocket heading for the lunar South Pole. And then The Star ran an article with the title, China and Russia trying to mine the moon to create cosmic nuclear weapons. That is coming from UK tabloid media. Anyway, that is the clown world for today. That's the video for today, coming to you from Nicosia, Cyprus, the Duran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, ODYSEE, BitChute, Rockfin, and Telegram. And go to the Duran shop. 10% off. Use the code. Good day. Take care.